over the last few years, I think there's this issue of GPU production.
Yeah.
Right. So even companies that had the models, that had the money to pay for the GPUs, couldn't necessarily get as many as they wanted because there were all these supply constraints.
Yeah.
Now I think that's sort of getting less. So now I think you're seeing a bunch of companies think about, wow, we should just like really invest a lot of money in building out these things. And I think that will go for some period of time. I think there is a capital question of like, okay, at what point does it stop being worth it to put the capital in? But I actually think before we hit that, you're going to run into energy constraints, right? Because I don't think anyone's built a gigawatt single training cluster yet, right? And then you run into these things that just end up being slower in the world. Like getting energy permitted is like a very heavily regulated government function, right? So you're going from, on the one hand, software, which is somewhat regulated. I'd argue that it is more regulated than I think a lot of people in the tech community feel. Although it's obviously different. If you're starting a small company, maybe you feel that less. If you're a big company, we just interact with people. Different governments and regulators are, we have kind of lots of rules or that we need to kind of follow and make sure we do a good job with around the world. But I think that there's no doubt that like energy, and if you're talking about building large new power plants or large build outs and then building transmission lines that cross other private or public land, that is just a heavily regulated thing. So you're talking about many years of lead time. So if we wanted to stand up just some like massive facility to power that, I think that's a very long-term project, right? And so I don't know. I think I think people will do it. But I don't think that this is like something that can be quite as magical as just like, okay, you get a level of AI and you get a bunch of capital and you put it in, and then like all of a sudden the models are just gonna kind of like I think you do hit different bottlenecks along the way. I think we would probably build out bigger clusters than we currently can if we could get the energy to do it. So I think that's
and that's fundamentally money bottlenecked in the limit. Like if you had $1 trillion,
I think it's time.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you look at it in terms of, but it depends on how far the exponential curves go, right? Like I think a number of companies are working on, right now I think like a lot of data centers are on the order of 50 megawatts or 100 megawatts, or like a big one might be 150 megawatts. Okay, so you take a whole data center and you fill it up with just all the stuff that you need to do for training, and you build the biggest cluster you can. I think that's kind of, I think a bunch of companies are running at stuff like that. But then when you start getting into building a data center that's like 300 megawatts or 500 megawatts or a gigawatt, just no one has built a single gigawatt data center yet. So I think it will happen, right? I mean, this is only a matter of time, but it's not going to be like next year, right? It's I think that some of these things will take, I don't know, some number of years to build out. And then the question is, okay, well, if you, just to, I guess, put this in perspective, I think a gigawatt, it's like around the size of like a meaningful nuclear power plant only going towards training a model.